You're listening to Get to Know World of Warships, a podcast created by Boggzy and Synpax.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have for you a very special treat because you've all been so good to me listening to the podcast over the last couple weeks where I learned how to do it myself and learned how to be a real boy after I was tossed from the nest and forced to fly on my own. So, to reward all of you, I have somebody very special. I have got Synpax to come back. So, Synpax, hello.
I have never, ever been described as a reward.
Well,
this is a first for me.
There are going to be many firsts, many firsts today. So let me just get right. Let me just get right into the most important question that I think is on everybody's mind. You left us on September 1st, 2020 to begin your journey to Moscow in order to convince the Russians to finally buff the Seattle's turret traverse. How did it go?
I was not successful in that endeavor, unfortunately. I never really got out of my apartment on that one. It was unfortunately just died as a dream.
Did you learn that they have these things called phones and emails so you don't actually have to leave to ask questions like that?
I considered it, but I'm trying to be low tech these days, at least insofar as social life.
I see. Okay. Well, I've planned to split this up into two parts. What I've been doing after you left is I've been creating, well, you and I talked about this before, but I've been making fake ads for the middle section, and it's been a lot of fun, so I'll throw a fake ad in there. Oh, yeah, by the way, to anybody listening who wasn't aware, the ads are all fake. I feel like I may have
It's good that you have that disclaimer. I know your audience, and I think it's...
I'm afraid I may have just ruined somebody's day. I should top that off by saying that the Tooth Fairy's not real either. So...
That was really one of the good ideas, was to do ads like that, because...
Yeah.
It's just so many missed opportunities for creative writing and performance. Everything from your voicemail message to a name tag to hell, you do a podcast. Let's make some funny ads and stick them in there. You know?
Yeah. They've been. I'll know that I've made it when somebody makes a super cut on YouTube of all the ads, all the fake ads that I do. But someday, that's the dream, I suppose.
I don't think it's quite the same when you ask for it so blatantly in the midst of the podcast.
Damn it.
But, let that not detract at all from when it ultimately happens. Although now it's really going to be quite sad if it doesn't happen.
I know. So. It's like asking for a compliment. It's the worst. Mm-hmm. So, may I ask you my first question? My first real question.
That is a question in itself.
All right, well, let me ask you this then. So, Synpax. The name Synpax has been a name synonymous with TNG since its inception. So who the hell is Synpax? And how the hell did he come to create a multi-time hurricane level from the ground up? I know that you have told previously on our podcast together that you started in a clan called Iron X. So... Just give me a quick, brief rundown, if you don't mind, of what led you to start TNG, and then how you came to become the dictator of it.
Was this about the etymology of the word Synpax, or was this, was that what you were asking?
No, but if there is etymology to the word Synpax, gimme.
No, there isn't, but you asked the question, so I wanted to... It's just a combination of, I guess, two Latin components, syn and pax, which created peace. Syn meaning synthesized, and pax meaning peace. So, pretty simple.
So there is etymology to it.
Yeah, strangely enough. I mean, I thought I had created it. I'd used the tag in a few different environments, but the name was already. I discovered subsequently the name had been out there in different, because you've ever gone to a game and you want, oh, this is the name I'm going to use, and you enter it, or you just enter the URL or drop it into Google, and there's there's a lot of Synpaxes out there.
Huh.
And it's kind of a little disappointing when you think you created something unique. Short of just adding a bunch of numbers after it, it's very hard to do that these days. Oh yeah, but the history of the clan was I started to take this game a little bit too seriously a while back, and I was in a clan, and it was kind of, it's one of those unfortunate situations where you kind of get tired of being mediocre and you want to become better, and when you do that as a clan, it involves um, bringing in better people, and it's kind of the nature of how clans work in this particular game. I don't really play anything else. I really hadn't played anything else other than this game for an eternity, at least not in anything remotely resembling a competitive environment. And you can take the people you've got and try to improve them and build skill, and you can do that yourself very intentionally. But you can't really do that with other people. They're kind of, for the most part, fixed values, and maybe their skill level isn't fixed value, but their desire to get better and invest the time, that tends to be a fixed value. Occasionally, somebody who's kind of doesn't take the game seriously, kind of the bug gets in them. They're like, wait a minute, I'm going to start focusing. I'm going to get better. They notice their numbers, start investing the time and effort, or watching videos and doing whatever it takes, like anything else, to become better. But for the most part, people are fairly fixed in their interest level, or if it changes, it changes slowly. So that requires bringing in newer people, and there was some conflict in the old clan with bringing in older people because the core of that group was a very different kind of clan. That they didn't really recruit. They're basically just friends in real life to some extent. Been friends in different games. I have no idea what they're doing now, but I don't doubt that they're all still tight knit and in touch. And that does not jive with the way competitiveness works in World of Warships.
Hmm.
So there was some conflict in building it, and so I ended up deciding that was just the right thing to. I didn't want to. I didn't think that their leadership jived with what I wanted to do, so I created TNG kind of on the fly without much forethought. Usually, just I was just given I wasn't sure exactly what leadership was going to do with the old clan because they were getting kind of pissy and kind of drunk, and I really didn't want to be uh, under the at their whim. So
Hmm.
decided, I'm going to kick it out, start this new group, start trying to find some innovative ways to try to climb up, to kind of overcome that sort of inherent challenge because other leagues they've got salary caps, they've got drafts and other things like that to add some balance between teams, and none of that really exists in the way that clans structure or work in World of Warships. So in a way, I was kind of inventing my own game. Apart from World of Warships, it was basically clan management in World of Warships,
Sure.
and that game was quite captivating and uh, had far more texture than the game itself does. And if you think about you think about a clan battle and the different ship line. I don't know what the next season. I actually have not logged into Discord since shortly after I departed,
Hmm.
and I really haven't paid attention to the game. But I'm sure there's another clan battle season coming up, and you've got a finite number of ships, finite number of positions, strategies, etc. But then when you think about building a clan, the number of strategies you can engage in, eh, the the way you approach it, the way there are so many different problems and puzzles to solve, and the different ways to attack them are limitless. And that was the game that I was playing, apart from say the game itself, apart from clan battles, apart from calling battles or designing strategy. There's sort of this overall game, and not too many people play it. But it was, and sort of the way I had designed it, it had challenges because I've mentioned this before, but if you're a really great player, you join a really great clan, and the clan stays a really great clan because they've got really great players. You can almost look at it as you would say the Ivy League schools, right? Harvard produces phenomenal graduates, people that go on to become presidents, that go on to become Supreme Court justices, all kinds of success in the business world. But they also, all of their students, the ones that enter, those are the folks who are also the cream of the crop. The best of the best go to Harvard. And the question is, well, is it really Harvard that made them presidents, Supreme Court justices, or they're just the kind of people that had that in them to begin with, and not to such an extreme or serious extent, but that's how the clans organize. And we were basically like your little land grant state school, trying to find a way to swing with the big boys. And I'm kind of happy with how that played out. I think there were a lot of innovations, and a lot of unique puzzles and problems that had to be solved with very unique solutions.
Well, that's really interesting the way that you described that. You said a lot there, and I actually, man, I was thinking, oh, I want to talk about that, and I want to talk about that, and I want to talk about that. So let me just real quick put a pin in two things, and then we'll pick one and talk about that, and then we'll go to the other one. I just don't want to forget it. One, you described the process of running a clan, and sort of by association running a Discord, as a game in and of itself. Meaning, I'm assuming that you mean in that folks need to find a sort of purpose and reason, and therefore a reward for the effort and attention and the I guess the interactivity that they apply towards it. And it sounds like you're saying that that in its of itself almost became a more complex and fulfilling game than the actual shooty pixel casino boat game that we're all here for. So that's point one. And then it sounded like also you sort of were mentioning that you're sort of talking about the notion of you can only be as good, you can only learn and increase in skill or capabilities as much as the people you surround yourself with, which I think was the second point when you sort of mentioned that swinging with the big boys and Harvard, and is it an inherent factor of who's playing it, or is it based on the people they surround themselves with? So let's first talk about the notion of who you surround yourself with, and I'd like to specifically sort of discuss that in terms of your experience the first time that TNG hit Hurricane. So if you could specifically for me just sort of describe how things were working and what led to the first time that TNG actually made it into Hurricane League.
It was just a combination of legacy knowledge. We learned things in the previous season of how things work, and the need to, and we're talking about like techniques, like small technique things, like the need to ladder ratings. Ladder ratings means telling people they either can't play or they have to go to another branch. It also became much more focused on strategy, rather than, hey, you just go over here, you go over here, and relying on player skill. And also just cycling through enough players. I think at one point I did a count. I'm sure it's higher now, but I want to say at that point around maybe 400 to 500 people had TNG tags on themselves at some point. So if you've ever panned for gold, that's kind of how the recruitment model for TNG worked. Is you're going through a lot of silt and trying to find those little shiny nuggets and trying to hold on to those nuggets and giving those nuggets a reason to stick around.
If you don't mind me interjecting for a second, what were a few things that would let a nugget tell you that it was a shiny nugget worth keeping?
Well, on the outset, who got recruitment messages, because that's primarily how all the recruitment happened, was just raw stats, because that's the most efficient way to sort through 90,000 players, or however many are. I think it was something like 90,000 the last time I built the player database. And then you sort of say, okay, who are the people we want to at least have an initial conversation with? The only effective way to do that is through stats or something else that would indicate it early on. Ranking out demonstrates the kind of fortitude and interest in the game that suggests that somebody might have a future to contribute in a meaningful way. It's also some mindfulness is that the folks who are walking around with deep purple 65-70% win rate stats, over 60% solo, etc., phenomenal PRs. Often those people, not counting rerolls, are usually at around 3,000 to 4,000 games or higher. But before they were there, when they were at the 1,000 or 1,500 or 2,000 games, maybe they were just 55 or something like that. this was also looking for people who would eventually have the potential to become that, but they were just a little bit earlier on that development curve. And finding those folks who maybe another clan wouldn't even consider somebody with 1,500 games and a 53% win rate. But if they showed up in response to one of our messages, if they showed up for clan battles, 16 hours a week or something, and they were always there and they were participating in discussions, wanting to play around with the strategy tool, all those kinds of things, and also getting great feedback from their captain, the crew that they were in, or the people who would div with them for randoms. I mean, many times captains would come to me and they'd say, "Hey, this player, I want them on my crew. I played some randoms with him," and I would think about it from as like, because I'd say, their numbers in my head aren't that great, or they don't have a lot of tier 10 ships or something like that. But the captain would just say, "Hey, I play with this guy. I just want him." I was like, "Okay, fine, take them." And that happened in many cases with me, where I would jump into a random battle with somebody. I think, I like the way they communicate. I like certain aspects about them, and that kind of, there's multiple levels of sorting, starting right from, hey, look at the raw stats and an invite, have an initial conversation, see if they show up or not. And, it's not a really big deal if somebody comes in here, they say, yeah, I'm going to show up, at least 75% of the time. They end up showing like, a couple times the first couple weeks of clan battles, and then we never hear from them again. It's no real big loss to us. We just cut them. But by being that open, it gives a lot of other people the opportunity to step forward and shine and be recognized and get integrated into the culture and the system and the way things worked while I ran things.
Excuse me. So you sort of using those parameters to bring new folks in. As a clan leader, then obviously you have to provide some sort of structure in which those folks can sort of arrange themselves and find a purpose within the clan. How exactly do you sort of go about doing that? And how much of a tool was Discord in that regard, of sort of creating a playground for folks to come in and stay in the clan?
Well, Discord is one of those tools of building community, and the clan, I mean, we couldn't some tool like it. I think originally the clan I was with initially had TeamSpeak, and we migrated over to Discord. But people are looking, I think, for one of two things, or maybe both of these. One is some kind of validation, and that is usually what you find in people who are chasing stats or chasing, having their clan tag in purple, or just wanting to have some kind of feedback that says, hey, you're succeeding at this game, you're good at this. A lot of cases, and I don't mean this in a critical way, but you may find often in video games, people pursue that feedback, in this environment because they're not getting it anywhere else. And they don't know how to get it anywhere else, or they believe they're incapable of getting it anywhere else. So the fact that, their numbers are all in purple in some shooting pixel boat casino game becomes extremely important. And it's something that's a monster that has to be fed endlessly. It has an appetite that knows no limit. And creating ways to do that within a clan, especially one that's kind of only at different stages was up and coming, is somewhat difficult. And part of the way you answer that is things like, I don't know, we had our TNG high score competition.
Yes.
So that was something unique to us. I'm surprised nobody else did it, but that was just another way to add that positive feedback, people chasing those tags. And then also within the clan battle environment is to make sure that folks are playing in crews. As it's not possible to do this perfectly. I gave up, but to get close to getting people playing with crews that are approximately of their own skill or skills, everybody's sort of close enough together that it's not always one person always ruining the game, ruining the chance for victory. So, and you saw in the surveys that we did after the season, we would ask, did you think your skill level was about the same, above or below your, the crew you're with? And overwhelmingly people say, it's about the same. Some people say it's better, but almost nobody ever says that, they're, no one said they were behind for multiple seasons. It's amazing. So amazing humility among gamers. But so sort of making sure they're always in an environment where they're being pushed, and if they lose, it's more of a collective effort or strategy effort rather than always being one person's fault. And also that means that they can really enjoy those victories. The second, I said, is two things. So one is that pursuit of validation. The other is the pursuit of community, and that's something we pretty much encourage through. We have a lot of different interest channels. The whole trifecta thing,
Mm-hmm.
that is first and foremost a community builder. To have some sense of
For
pride.
anybody who doesn't know
Go
what
ahead.
Synpax is talking about there, TNG has a screenshots channel. As many clans and discords will have a sort of a screenshot channel for sharing of things. But we had we have a real fun thing where sort of anytime that a group of TNG members manages to take all three of the top three spots in the team score, you're encouraged to share that screenshot as a trifecta, and that sort of bled into funny, I guess, offshoots of that, where you get the trifecta in a loss called the failfecta, and then it became quad, or what's five?
The quadfecta.
Pentafecta?
Yeah, there have been a few quadfectas.
Yeah.
I was never a fan of the failfecta. I was more of a sad trifecta. But but the thing is, people are inventing and extending the culture through language, through terminology,
Right.
Beyond the initial design, which is this sign of a healthy culture.
Yeah, and it's just when you wake up and then you maybe go to work and you deal with things in a very long-term hierarchy like work, especially folks who have office jobs or sort of more monotonous administrative type jobs, and maybe they don't get any sort of sense of reward. I think to come back and to pop onto Discord and to know that there are these folks who are playing a game with you, and you can in good faith and in good fun sort of flex a little bit on each other. Or maybe I like the trifecta one because it's like, hey, the three of us did this together. It's not like, look how awesome I am. That was the whinge brag channel. But the trifecta was always sort of a fun thing, just because it does help build that sense of community. So
Yeah, I know that it earned a bit of ridicule or scorn from outsiders, but it's just so simple and so earnest in its what it's saying and what it's doing. It's just as what you said there, right?
It's very earnest,
so,
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so you mentioned the crew system, and I know that we did basically an entire podcast, what seems like a millennia ago, about sort of how the crew system in TNG works or worked. But folks can always go back and listen to that if they want. But I'm sort of curious to know if, I guess, what made you decide to institute a crew system in the first place? Versus, just the standard sort of, we have a clan of 30, 50 people, and we just sort of split it up as the night comes along.
Well, the original problem has to do with, it was originally a way of helping to manage the problem of the way clan battle scores or the point system works, where you've got, let's say, your clan of 50 people, and you really need to just ladder the scores to be successful. There aren't too many clans out there that I'm aware of that are strong enough to not ladder. As far as I know, all of them ladder, including the ones that finish first, and have historically. Ever since the dual scores have been allowed, but even before that, it was even more important that when you decide you're serious about your clan battle scores, that only people who can push those scores forward are playing, and anybody that's a drag on the scores, well, that hurts your chances to succeed. And it's kind of a vicious cycle in that you build a clan around the idea of winning, and if you do something that doesn't advance you towards winning, you're kind of breaking the promise you made to people who joined. Even if the people who joined under the guise of winning are no longer the ones who are able to say push that top rating, if they're getting in the way of winning, even there should and that was somewhat helpful to us because before we had crews, we had the first big fold, which is where we folded everybody in branch TNG one season who could not continue to advance the rating, who couldn't play in that division without harming its chances of gaining points into TNG2. And that was a difficult time. It was probably the most difficult thing, as a clan we had to do collectively, especially the first time we did it. But it had to be done. And the alternative would have been to tell these people, 1/3 through the season, you can't play clan battles anymore, which is what some clans do. So what we ended up doing was moving everybody we thought could contribute into 2, and then they played clan battles however they saw fit, as many, as often as they wanted. But the group that was able to push the numbers would remain in TNG.
I see.
But there was another sort of lesson that was kind of being learned, is that if you get a group of people, particularly under one leader and a few core folks who have played across multiple seasons, there tends to be a collective intelligence, an institutional knowledge that develops among that group, where they sort of know how to communicate, they know each other's strengths and weaknesses, they understand strategy together. And by keeping them together, so they kind of learn together. So the idea was, okay, instead of just moving individual players around, which is what we had initially done with folding, is we would build these crews and have them sort of satisfy a much more granular skill stratification. Whereas if we're just moving individuals between the different branches, you get moved into TNG2 with some pretty good players and some pretty, not quite as good players, and that causes dissatisfaction, because maybe that pretty good player that got moved down to 2, maybe he just didn't get enough face time with leadership in TNG. Maybe he has future potential to be in a clan that pushes ratings all the way through the end of the season, or rotates into that group, that division that is the lead one. We need to keep that person around. But if we move him into a branch that's suddenly not competitive, where he's got to play divisions with people who are, a few steps behind him in skill, then that's deeply dissatisfying to him, and he may leave, right? So with the crew system, you actually build people who are relatively close in skill, because the crews had priority in terms of who had first pick and second pick. And then after a few seasons, well, the core members of each crew, those were no longer really up for grabs anymore, but there's still plenty of new bloods floating in to circulating in for, to manage. And, and then it would become a matter of, the crew that really needs a CV player, well, let's get them a good CV player, right. That kind of thing. And having these crews develop and advance themselves, and on their own, I would say, the crew captain, look, Shinobi's, harsh as it sounds to say, would always be looking to cut their weaker player and replace them with a new person that came in the door, at least trying out new people each season. And that's kind of how it evolved. So it was just a way of kind of having your cake and eating it too, by, better managing the point system that's forced upon us by wargaming, better managing the demands of people to basically be playing in crews where they're satisfied that they're not being held back by any individuals, right? They're playing with people who are about as good as they are, who are increasing in ability and skill as they themselves are increasing. You don't want to have the night where you look at, you had 6 wins and 3 losses, and 3 losses are all because of the same person doing the same stupid thing. The 3 losses are because of something much more deeper and complicated you can all recognize on a strategic level, and that's the kind of thing that keeps people happy enough to stick around.
Right.
And to keep contributing, and to keep developing and growing.
Right, which is, this is literally, I think I recall you saying one time that it's just inevitable for people to leave clans. It just happens due to burnout, it happens due to real-life complications, it happens due to interpersonal dissatisfaction, what have you, and that ensuring that you lose the fewest number of people while bringing in new people was literally the way that a clan continues to progress versus flame out and die. Is that right? There's a churn curve that you've got to stay ahead of. So you're always going to be losing people. So you always have to be pulling in new people, because if you stop recruiting, you're basically a dead clan. You're just waiting to become dead if you don't have an aggressive recruitment program. And there are some clans, just because they're at the top, they'll always be at the top because they're always recruiting the best players. Not so much a concern because they have their pick. Those clans are, but especially when it was developing, and through much of the time that I was running TNG, the name was never recruiting people.
It always had to be finding people who had never thought, introducing the idea of playing in a competitive clan to people who had never really considered it before. Said, wait, I've never thought about that. Maybe it will be fun. Maybe it will be better than the clan I'm currently in, or maybe I've never played competitively at all, or never even thought of joining a clan, but I got this message. Let me check it out. And breaking them through all the challenges that people go through when they first start playing clan battles competitively. It's many of them enter it for the first time with a random battle mindset, and it's nothing like that at all.
Right. Well, so you touched on something perfect that's going to let me transition here, which is essentially the notion of what TNG means, what it stood for, and how people regarded it. So the name Synpax has a certain notoriety to it in the culture of World of Warships. It certainly did when I joined in January, and it took me a little while to find out why and how. And I think to be fair, that has actually changed quite a bit in the last, I would say, 8-9 months. But I want to just real quick, for anyone who is not actually familiar with the history of it, what exactly is it that made Synpax and TNG in general so notorious for so long?
You're asking me?
Yes, I am.
Oh, it seems like one of those questions that would be posited to those who consider it notorious.
Oh, you don't consider it notorious? Okay.
Well, no. I mean, I understand that it is, but the reasoning is not something that I would ever consider. I think it was probably maybe two things. First and foremost was the recruitment method, which I have to say is nothing short of genius, but really,
God bless
really rubbed a lot of people the wrong way for some reason. Like I said, a lot of folks, their lives kind of center around things like this game, and the opportunity to complain about something and make a crusade over it is kind of pathetic, but it happens. So somebody doing something different that stands out, suddenly that becomes something to criticize or make a lot of noise about, or whatever. What do the kids do today? Meme on something?
They make TikTok videos.
Whatever. Yeah. Same formula, just different terminology. Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think some of it is also, I affected a certain personality that I would describe as earnest naivete, which was, I thought, very effective for the game that I was playing. Mm-hmm. But it could frustrate. I understand how some could potentially find it frustrating.
Well, let's digress into that for just a second, because I always thought of myself as earnest naivete, but I always thought that's just because I'm an idiot and that's just how I am, and I learn things quickly, but I learn. It's been a struggle for me, at least, to change my general outlook on how the structure of the world functions. I think it's just based on how I was raised. I was raised to be very trusting and to be very forthright and to be very honest in general. So it took me a long time to sort of realize, hey, that's fine, but you can't be foolish. You can't be stupid. You have to know what the monster looks like. Otherwise, the monster can be anywhere. To use sort of a little metaphor there. So I never thought of you as, well, earnest. Yes, I would say earnesty was a quality of yours, but naive, you never struck me as naive. So why would you consider yourself naive?
Oh, no. I didn't say it was earnest or naive. I said I had affected. AFFECTED.
I see. I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
A personality that could be perceived that way, and that was helpful. But also, some would find it take it. Well, the thing is that when you're perceived that way, first of all, it completely puts people. They let their guard down because they don't see you as a threat. They also tend to think they can get one over on you.
Right.
And that also means that they say a lot more than they might otherwise. And it's just a good way of getting information out of people. Or you ask them a question, and many times you ask somebody a question. I do this in uh, this is a skill that applies everywhere. But sometimes you ask somebody a question, you know what the answer is,
Mm-hmm.
or you know the real answer,
You mean like
but
my
you want
question
to
of why
hear.
is Synpax so notorious?
Sure, but you want to know. But you want to know how they're going to answer the question, or it's not so much that you don't know the answer yourself, but you just want to hear it. So sometimes when you ask somebody a question and they think, oh, this person, why is he asking me this question? If he doesn't know the answer, he must be stupid. So I can, or he's not that careful, or isn't terribly sharp, or is somebody I can, which is really what you're looking for, is somebody I can impress.
There you go.
Because, and like I said, folks want to impress people. They want to have a sense of awe, and if you willingly fulfill somebody's desire to that you're in awe of them, they're so much more likely to share with you, to tell you more than they maybe should otherwise. So yeah, you just the big doe-eyed look and say, oh, why is it that way? And they kind of just give you they're not threatened by you. They're impressed that they have the chance, or they're happy to have the chance to impress somebody and have somebody in awe of them, and they end up speaking and sharing more than they really should. It's just a really good human intelligence technique to
And
get more out of people than they would otherwise, and it helps.
it's delightfully insidious too. I like it. I mean, not to say that you, sir, are insidious, but just that description.
Well,
of
that's
it
pretty
is-
much what you just said, but okay. You can try to walk that one back.
I've been getting caught lately. People in my real life have been telling me to stop walking things back, but it's a little insidious. But maybe that's just from me sort of assuming that no one is trying to manipulate me. But that's foolish on my
Well,
part.
but remember, I mean, when I was here, I was playing a game. There was a game I was playing. It was Clan Builder,
Right.
and it's just like, what can we do? How far can I take this? And so it's all part of it. And I mean, it helped that I played the game and was decent at it, I guess. Decent. I mean, pretty decent crew captain. But you probably could have done almost all of those things without actually even playing the game itself.
You mean without playing Shooty Pixel Casino boat game?
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, could very well. I
In
suppose
theory, right?
at a certain point, you could have just sort of quietly stopped playing and said, "I'll be here to do these. I just have to." And then 2 or 3 months could go by without you playing an actual game, and someone might not realize it as long as your activity was parallel to the game in the sense that you have. You're allowing other people to play it in a different capacity or something like that. I can actually
Right,
see
and
that.
it was, and the Clan Simulator 2000 actually consumed more time than I put into actually. And in fact, sometimes I would just want to I miss playing World of Warships.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah.
like, hey, I haven't gotten to play any games this Puerto Rico I've got sitting in port. What? No, but instead it was always like, wait a minute, I've got time to do this. I'm instead going to devote it towards, I don't know, trying to recruit another, 30 people for the next clan battle season, or
Right.
organize or talking to captains to figure out, who here can do this, or whatever else, could consume that time.
Absolutely. I mean, I suppose the nature of any game is that it creates other games. It creates sub games, and then it creates, I guess, whatever the opposite of sub game. I guess it would be macro games, maybe, or meta games. Meta games. That would be probably. But I guess clan leader or podcast maker or live. I'm sure there's plenty of other things that sort of come from that. And then maybe don't strike people immediately as, oh, this is another game within this game.
Well, this all, and it's self-designed and self-driven. Like 20 years ago, I was playing this. I was actually an editor and writer for a gaming magazine where we review games and that kind of stuff. And I played one that's like a morgue. It was the usual morgue. But this one guy I came across had a very bizarre way of playing it. Is that every time his character would die, he would delete the character and start again. Because the character has its own death counter. Typically you die thousands of times,
Sure,
right?
right.
Because you're leveling the character.
I lost you for a second there.
Whatever, people. I imagine people die all the time, right?
Yeah, sorry, I
But
gotta
his
stop
way
you
of
real
playing
quick
it was that
because
every time he died.
I gotta stop you real quick because you actually cut out for about 10 seconds there, right after you were describing what he does. What he does after you said he deletes the character every time he dies rather than just keep a death counter. You mind saying that
Right.
again?
Yeah. So ordinarily in a morgue like World of Warcraft, you would you die routinely and you just pick your character up, but you keep leveling and gaining points or whatever
Mm-hmm.
XP on your character. But what he would do is that every time he died, he would just delete the character and start a brand new one. So it seems insane, right? But that was his way of he designed a game, and that's what he was playing. Doesn't seem fun to me, but to him that was his thing. So with your approach to World of Warships, I mean, you've seen people do all kinds of crazy stuff in randoms.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't really know what they're doing, but sometimes it's just that's the game they've chosen to play. Their job is to take their destroyer, go all the way around the side of the map to the back of the enemy team, and maybe try to sink a battleship or an aircraft carrier.
Right. Yeah.
Who knows?
There's
That's their game.
There's no limit to the sub games a person can come up with if they give it a little thought and a little bit of energy. So we're at 40 minutes right now, and I don't myself have a limit on how long this can go, but I do want to at least just get us to break here real quick. So I have a few questions from other clan leaders that were submitted to me for you specifically, and some of them were some were overlapping with others, some were already questions that I was going to ask. So I picked pretty much one from each of these folks. So the first question is from Eagle Lance, who's the leader of 007. And he wanted to know what some of your biggest challenges were as a clan leader.
Almost always people and their complaints and the way they don't get along with each other, and they're having to, and you can't, if you're playing Clan Simulator 2000, that's an inescapable part. So I'm not complaining about it. It's just that a tremendous amount of time was dealing with disaffected players who are angry at somebody else, somebody had done something, cut out of line, or just those interpersonal conflicts of people complaining about each other and not managing to get along. That's the most complicated, the most challenging thing, because everything would seem to be going, and suddenly somebody does something or says something, or I start getting my inbox filled with complaints, and the two people that are, one person's complaining about somebody and that person's complaining about them. So it's like, just finding the best way to mitigate that, to keep the peace. Sometimes it means, moving somebody from one crew to another, or sometimes it means getting them both in the same room to talk things through. Sometimes it means kicking someone out of the clan. It's so it's always, and I think this is probably true for any clan leader, it really is just dealing with HR issues and people's inability to get along with each other without having an adult come in and intervene or smooth things over.
You said that was one of your greatest challenges. Did you find it to be a rewarding and fulfilling challenge, or did you find it more to be just like an emotional slog?
Well, if you want to eat a cake, you have to bake it. And some of that baking process is kind of messy and difficult,
Mm-hmm.
So you can't, it's an inescapable part of it. And remember, personnel is the clan success is driven first and foremost by who's in it. So the HR issues, I say that when I describe them as HR, it sounds like I'm being dismissive of them because, it's just an HR matter. But the truth is that a clan's success or failure is entirely driven by HR issues.
Fair enough.
So it's like the company is that department. So it's the thing is that the way I saw it or took it is, in an ideal situation, I recognize that HR issues are just another puzzle that I have to solve, and not to take them personally.
I see. So the next question was submitted by Borla, who's always had an interest in our podcast and in helping us. And he wanted to know.
Nice guy.
Yeah, and he also should be noted that he also runs a very, very large clan himself with multiple tiers. We always seem to have a lot of sort of, what would you call it? A lot of things, common issues and common experiences sort of line up and transpose easily onto one another. So he wanted to know what were 2 or 3, or what have you, of the most important things that you delegated out to your clan in terms of responsibilities. And as a follow-up, what were 2 or 3 things that you had wished you had delegated but you either couldn't or you didn't? It could also just be one thing if that's too much.
No, the delegation was basically the crew system of giving a crew captain responsibility for running their crew, and some new crews tended to demand more attention from me and management to smooth over new crew problems. But after a season or two, find that crews would start to stand up on their own legs and not rely on that, or really not have to pay them too much attention at all. So I think that was probably helpful. I think delegating to you some of the interclan relation stuff was probably helpful. I just didn't really have any. I didn't think I had anybody that could really handle that well until it came along, and I certainly didn't want to handle it myself because there's only so many hours in the day, and I'd rather devote my time to recruitment, honestly. So talking to other clans, wasn't really sure there was a tremendous return on that investment, but it could help, and it also serves as, as many embassies do around the world. Guess what? They're also where the CIA station chief is. So it has the additional value of providing intelligence, which can be helpful.
Disclaimer to everybody listening. I promise I'm not tapping your phones. Anything you say in the embassy to me or anyone else, it's private. Don't worry.
Well, yeah, sure. Things I wish I'd delegated better or more of. I did hand off some recruitment responsibilities to one person, but just the initial stage. No, I was pretty much okay with that. I think some of the IT stuff maybe could have gotten a little bit more help with, but yeah, I can't really think of too much. I did think it was important though that I really needed to stay on top of the recruitment stuff, and that was not something I could just hand off or parse off very, very easily, because you had to bring a level of energy to recruitment that was hard. It's hard to find that in somebody else.
Right.
Hey, can we take a commercial break now? And I got to take a call.
Yeah, go answer the phone. Hey, you! Check out the new energy drink everyone is raving about. Maximum Ooh! You want to taste that feeling when your cat reaches out and takes your hand in its paw? Maximum Ooh! You want an energy drink that's so sweet that girls will automatically friend-zone you? Maximum Ooh! You want an energy drink so fire that your eyes roll back in your head and your spine slides out your anus? Maximum Ooh! Then join the inexplicable side of the internet that turns everything into a character from an 8-bit Nintendo game because it has maximal cross-culture marketing appeal and put it in your body. Maximum Ooh! Thank you, everybody, for sticking with us through a quick break there. This is a very special episode if you're just joining us for some reason. I have finally managed to get Synpax to come back after his departure. I'm very excited. We spent the first section there talking about what it means to be a clan leader, talking about the history of TNG, the history of Synpax himself, and asked some questions from other clan leaders. And now I have a new guest. I would like to all introduce you to Matt. Hello, Matt. That's so exciting.
Nice to see you, Joey?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, all right.
I'm not too shy about it. I say it on my stream all the time. So.
Oh, I meant to ask you, how's Bree doing?
Bree's doing very, very well. She and I are still very happy, and we're even talking about making the jump to living together, as we've almost been seeing each other for a year now. So things have gone well. She's joined me on my stream and has been a delightful presence because she's a monster, and everybody just seems to love her for being a monster on stream. So
That's cool. So how's her brother Gargonzola?
what?
How's her brother Gargonzola doing?
Oh, man. You remember the best idea you ever had for the podcast was to take a ship horn, play it on podcast, and then try to have people identify what ship horn it was.
Was that really the best idea?
That was the best idea you ever had, because I've never heard you laugh so hard as when you just were like, this is the stupidest idea ever.
Yep.
That was a terrible idea. I loved it though. So
yeah, the podcast was a lot of fun. It kind of it was purely indulgent. I would say 90% indulgent, but
yeah.
and honestly, I mean, I guess some part of my ego is actually kind of glad that you're continuing with it.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be really honest. You're right. It is indulgent in some way. I feel like, at least from my part now that I'm doing it alone, I sort of feel like it's sort of like a symbiotic thing, because from what I recall, your idea to start the podcast had always been to sort of shine a little bit of light on the cultural landscape of the clans. And, I always sort of was like, yeah, it's a good idea. And then I always suspected, too, you wanted to, like, try and mine any data and information or, things you could from the folks that we talked to as well. That's helpful. Information is just helpful. So I always felt like it was sort of probably a reciprocal process there. So you might be getting information that's helpful to you and helpful to us as a clan. But at the same time, you're also sharing information that is or is not helpful to us with folks to whom it definitely is useful. Smaller clans or clans that are growing or having issues or what have you. So I sort of look at it the same way, where, it's definitely good for me. I've had some opportunities come up that have allowed me to grow my stream pretty quickly, and I've worked hard learning how to create YouTube videos and whatnot to try and, stop being a bartender, basically. I've put some work into that, and this is very helpful for that in the sense that I get to talk to folks and make some friendships and whatnot. There is something self-indulgent about it, no question. But I was always proud of the fact that, since this is now an interview of me, of course, I was always proud of the fact that, it mattered to us to get down to the root of what was going on and try to like figure out what that nugget of knowledge was, and then share what the knowledge is. So that anybody listening, regardless of where their game is, their clan game or their warships game or their, even their life game, I suppose, something they could take and put in their pocket and then pull out later when they might need it.
Yeah.
Did you ever find that?
Well, the original motivation was, you sort of hit on it, is that it was anthropological. I always found I've been a aficionado of documentaries for a very long time, and I always really liked documentaries that sort of dive into a niche or subculture. And there's so many of them, and it's sort of my favorite kind of documentary. Of there's the folks who dress up as superheroes in front of the Chinese theater in Los Angeles and Panhandle. Sort of looked into their lives, or one that looks into bronies, or some other, or the culture of LARP, like real LARPers, in Northern Virginia, called Darkon, and kind of those kinds of, or I don't know, Harry Potter, whatever subcultures there are, and every clan has its own kind of culture. The podcast is kind of an excuse to ask a bunch of questions that they, otherwise you wouldn't be able to get that information unless it was the cover of, hey, if you just showed up and started asking questions, they like, hey, who is this guy? But when we say, hey, I've got a podcast, right. Tell us how you got started. What have your biggest challenge been? How do you balance between your theme, which might be anime, and, trying to become more competitive, whatever that, and just sort of trying to get an inside view of it, just because I found it personally kind of interesting. And more broadly, it was useful as a tool for the clan, I thought, and making sure that it it wasn't always helpful to the clan, but never harmful, and sometimes very helpful to the clan. So those are kind of the drivers behind it, and um, I always I was always glad to hear from people who said they enjoyed the podcast, but I was very careful, and maybe you go in a different direction with this, and I maybe sensed a little bit of this from you, but I was never going to do anything for the listeners. I was only or something I didn't want to do or didn't want to talk about. I only was going to talk about stuff that was interesting to me, and if the audience likes that, it's fine. But I didn't ever want to feel a sense of obligation to the listeners. We had people on that because we never brought anybody on to talk about, I don't know, what's the best charging handle for an AR-15, right? That's a very interesting subject to me, but it wasn't really, warships related. But there was plenty of things in warships that I was kind of interested in. It's like, how do you have a My Little Pony clan? How is that supposed to work? And because it was warships related, or how are you going to do this CV boycott thing?
Yeah.
Or how did you win? Tell me about your clan getting disbanded for selling steel. Those are things that I was genuinely interested in. I never did a podcast where I faked interest in anybody. And honestly, sometimes we had some clans on who were not the most interesting, but then just bringing out a little bit of our inner troll or just having fun with the conversation, just sort of made it interesting. But I never sensed, hey, this is a big story, we should cover it on the podcast. Like, I deal with journalists all day, and I've just talking to one a little bit before we spoke today, and they kind of have to do this thing where they've got to cover stuff whether they want to or not. And I never wanted the podcast to be that.
Because we had control over it, so why do the thing that we don't want to?
Oh, there's a good reason. To grow your audience.
Oh, well, yes, there is that.
Right, but like I said, I mean, but I understand. But you are approaching it, as you've mentioned, you no longer want to be a bartender, and once you attach that motivation to anything, well, you know what? You can't say, pardon my. Well, I'm not going to curse, but you can't say, I don't care what the listeners think. You kind of now you have to. You're kind of obligated to give them. Well, okay, all right, yeah. You can't say fuck the listeners. You have to, you have to do your job.
There's
that job
relationship there, yeah. Which actually, this is a perfect way for me to segue into, I don't know if I ever told you this, but I'm an actor in Los Angeles, and
no, really,
yeah,
it's funny. Usually, you're pretty open about that.
So, I sort of. I guess I came to this bigger city as a young person in my 20s, knowing that my entire career trajectory was built off the concept of you must build out of thin air a connection to, and therefore a shared responsibility with, an audience full of people. And it's pretty much like with theater, it's pretty one-sided. People don't clap in theater, or they shouldn't, at least. And so it's essentially like putting on this display, but it's almost like music in the sense that you're putting on this thing that they're going to be judging silently, and you're waiting till the end to see what they thought about it. And it's this silent game that gets played in a way, which led me to end up doing stand-up comedy, which was a much more immediate and certainly much more immediately gratifying game, in the sense that you say something every 12 seconds that better get a laugh or a clap or something, and if you don't, you fucked up. Which leads me to
LPM of 6 is pretty high, but
which leads me to my question: how long did you do stand-up comedy?
Oh yeah, you it almost sounded like you saw doing stand-up as a downgrade from acting or something did as a second choice. Well, it's like the fallback, right? But yeah. I'll tell you that stand-up is it's sort of the trunk of a tree to a lot of things.
Yeah.
In the entertainment world, including executive producing or running a studio. You look at some of these guys' backgrounds, there's a stint of that. I did it for it's kind of a different person then. It was a different era, a different time, but I'd say 10 years, 15 years, no, maybe 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. I just said, hey, this could do this, and I'll give it 20 shots. I'll do it 20 times. I did it about 20 times, ended up starting a sketch group, which was, I'd say, fairly successful. Actually made some money.
You made money
And
with
we're
a sketch
probably selling
Oh.
tickets to your show.
Oh, okay.
But we're probably right about at the cusp of the part where you start chasing those television deals. Because you look at a lot of sketch groups that a lot you see a lot of sketch on television, or at the time, everything from Kids in the Hall to Reno 911 to there've been a lot of them, Key and Peele, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Many of them started as sort of these stage performing sketch groups, and then they get a contract, shoot a couple pilots. So we were sort of right about that stage, and then it sort of hit into HR issues where, again, you had this split between people who had a professional interest in it and those who had a just something you're doing for fun interest. And anyway, I was probably even a little too old for it at the time to make a serious run at it, but it was just one of those social activities to sort of pick up and put down. I can count on my hand at least 20 things just like that I've done in my life. From I've done Ironman triathlons. I've traveled all over to do them. I've done Muay Thai, just all the different things that all the different paths. So there was just a blink and point in my life with it. Oh, I could do it. And partly came from just watching stand up on television, saying, "Oh, come on, I can do this. I can do this better."
Well, okay. Well, I won't ask who you thought you could do it better then, because we have a rule on this podcast of not naming and shaming, even if they are multi-millionaires stand-up comedians.
Here's the insult is I can't even remember the name.
Oh, that's actually the better insult, yeah. So, and perfect, because there's no name to go along with it. Well, who were a couple of the stand-up comedians that at least they clicked for you, they really jogged for you and made you go, I love that?
I thought I would have a hard time talking about warships because I've already forgotten so much in the time that I've been away, right?
Yeah.
And you're asking me about this. Like I said, it was a very different time and different person so long ago. Gosh,
that's the extent of my questions.
I can't even answer. Honestly, that stuff is. I'm so far removed from that. I'd rather you ask me. That's fine. What's the best way to counter a Stalingrad or something? Because I could, even that I would struggle with. But
well, sure. Let's get back to the gray line between Matt and Synpax here. So the avatars that I've seen you use in the social aspects of the game have been Senator Sheev Palpatine, Bill the Butcher, and the ShamWow guy from The Boys. So there's a common denominator here. Why'd you choose these villains as your avatar? Do you not see them as villains? You just like villains?
They're villains?
Well,
I
think Palpatine might be a villain.
I don't know about that. I
knew this was going to be your answer. Go on.
No. I'm not going to try to reinvent somebody that's been widely considered to be epitome of evil, especially since I didn't see any of them, but apparently he got brought back into some of the movies at the end or something.
Yeah.
Oh, didn't we talk to a Star Wars clan? And one of the guys actually defended it.
It was the Jedi clan. It was one of the last episodes we did before you left. Yeah, and it was actually interesting just to talk about. It actually got Oskons and I talking to the point where I'm considering doing an entire podcast where Oskons and I just talk about why he hates The Last Jedi so much. Because I literally thought, oh, that's stupid. It's not warships related. And then I was like, I remember you saying, "Fuck that. This is our podcast. We can do whatever the hell we want."
You can do whatever you want, but once you attach the word "job" to this, maybe you can't. maybe you can't. But I think if you did label it as this episode is us just talking about Star Trek Wars, then let's skip it if they want. But you've got a pretty broad audience. Game of Thrones probably elicits similar levels of hatred for how it ended, as I recall.
Yeah.
And the overlap of the audience. One thing that I think I may have mentioned this too. There's angle of approach, angle of entry.
Yes.
Right. So angle of entry.
Immature joke about angle of entry.
Yeah. Well, an angle of entry for this podcast is kind of interested in World of Warships. Now, if you started talking about the internal politics of China, that's not what anybody came in here for, and that's so far off the angle of entry that they'll just bounce off, right?
Yeah.
But you talk about like Star Wars. I mean, I'm surprised. We had a Transformer crossover with the game, right? It wouldn't surprise me if we had a Star Wars, whatever, sell out for anybody these days. A Star Wars crossover. So I mean, it's not the audience is. There's a big overlap of that audience,
Yeah.
and what people come for when they come to this podcast. You might lose a few people, but it's not. But the ones you lose are not going to be angry about it. Like, oh, you sold us out. But it's sort of like adjacent enough.
Yeah.
I think you can get away with it.
The thing about Star Wars though is that like there are entire media companies dedicated specifically to creating endless content surrounding the culture of Star Wars. Like Collider is a media, I don't know if it's right to say conglomerate, but it's just this media blob on social media that it is purely made a living out of scraping up the dust and the dirt left by the Star Wars atom bomb, and then arranging that dust and that dirt into little things to say, here, look at this. Isn't this interesting? Here are 10 things you didn't know about that one guy in the background in the cantina in the third movie. Isn't that interesting? And they have ads that go on because people are like, yeah, that is interesting. I want to know about that.
Guys and Looper and all of those, and they do it with the headline and screenshot of the video that kind of has something circled and it makes you really want to click it.
That makes me want to scoop my eyeballs out with a spoon. Like those sort of things.
What you've really got to do those. I mean, there's sort of creating in the people watching or seeing it a desire to know something, to find something out. Like, oh, these are the ways the Game of Thrones HBO series is different from the books, the top 10 ways. But the truth is that you feel a need to find that out, but the reality is you don't. You have no reason to need to know that, and you've got to scrape whatever it is out of you that wants to desire and recognize that you don't, and put yourself, focus yourself on more productive things than watching stupid Looper videos or that kind of thing. But to go back to your original question, I always thought that those characters were just sort of interesting. And I think that using them as an icon was kind of a low-grade troll, Is that there's the person but then they're using this icon, and the story with Palpatine and Bill the Butcher and the other guy, right?
The
These are all
Shamrock
people
guy,
who present. Yeah, it's kind of funny to me because they present themselves as being these really, maybe not Bill the Butcher, but the other guys as these innocent, caring, very good, well-intentioned superheroes, but then the reality is a little different. So I like playing. It was just a fun thing for me to play with.
The one that surprised me that I never saw you have. Again, I was only in TNG since January is when I think I got poached. So I was always expecting to, had time gone on long enough, I was expecting you to have an Ozymandias avatar for a while there, just because Ozymandias is also, anybody who's not familiar, Ozymandias from the graphic novel The Watchmen by I almost said Frank Miller, but it's not. It's shit. It's like the only graphic novel I've ever read is The Watchmen. But Ozymandias is essentially it's a book about superheroes that are not usually superheroes, but Ozymandias is the smartest man in the world, and he attempts to essentially prevent global destruction by killing a bunch of people. And it's this sort of nefarious plot, but at the same time you sort of understand that his logic and his reasoning is on a different level than yours, but even then there's still another level beyond that. And I thought that's the sort of interesting, cool character that I felt like was next in line for your avatars, but just never made it there.
A pretty deep cut. They're pretty deep cut. And I will tell you that I probably never would have gone with that one, although I kind of get what you're saying, because I have personal ideological disagreements with the author of that comic book series.
Oh, really?
But also because when I was reading it, I just so much more identified with Rorschach. And
really?
I couldn't so once you kind of lock in with one character, even if another character seems to fit the description that might be useful, you're right. That would definitely have been a good character, but it's just not one that I think I ever would have gotten around to. And also, it's a pretty deep cut. I'm not sure how many people would have recognized that one.
Yeah.
So he's a bit. I mean, how many people really recognize Bill the Butcher? So
It took me a minute, yeah. The mustache and the top hat, the stove top hat are dead giveaways for me for Gangs of New York. But again, I only call him the ShamWow guy just because I've never seen The Boys. I'm not opposed to it, I just haven't gotten around to it. And so I saw this smiling sort of malevolent face, and I was like, it looks like the ShamWow guy. And I asked you, I was like, why'd you do that? And you're like, it's not the ShamWow guy. It's from The Boys. Oh.
yeah,
All right.
yeah.
Well, so let me just, before we move too far on, I do want to ask you just a couple questions about, before we move away from the podcast as a topic, I do want to ask you, are you aware of how long 12 to 15 minutes actually is?
I'm not. I had no idea that it would. You just don't know these things until you go into it, right?
Yeah.
These unknowns, and originally it seemed, oh, that would be just fine, but then it wasn't. So I don't think any of them were quite that short. Even though, I mean, although miraculously, the very first one with a very colorful guest or colorful couple of guests really was that short.
Yeah, 20 minutes, I think, right?
Something like that.
And even then we were like, oh, we can't let it go that long in the future.
So there were definitely podcasts where I was messaging you saying, hey, we got to cut this guy off. It's going on too long because they get out in the weeds on technical stuff. And it's just, I mean, if we're dying, the audience is definitely dying too. And,
Certainly.
I mean, not everybody is as gifted or succinct a communicator as you are, Boggzy,
Thank you.
as we learned.
Succinct?
And,
I've never been accused of being succinct.
Well, succinct, when you're, the opposite of succinct is boring.
Oh,
so
really?
Let's put when I said succinct, that's what I meant. You usually tend to keep it interesting, except for I don't know, some of your stories I've heard a few too many times.
That's a direct result of the fact that I actually have a poor short-term memory. So,
or just a limited number of stories to tell. But
aww, you're lucky I don't have any feelings. Oh Lord. Well, yeah, it was certainly a shock to get to go back and listen to an episode where, given what we know now, I mean, we probably could have talked to Lady K about 90th for an hour and a half, but it all managed to sort of get through in 20 minutes, and it was funny going back and listening to that now and sort of going like, wow, it's like this, because this will be technically this will be the 53rd episode. I actually kept episode 50 open just because that was always my intention, to put you, whether it was while you were still doing it with me, put you at 50 where we just interview you, or after you left, I sort of went, well, I want to give him a break, and I don't want to drag his ass back too quickly, because I did respect your decision to leave. It's important to not lose sight of the tangible things in your life, like work and like your loved ones, and I respect that fundamentally, and I didn't want to try to lure you back with the shiny lights of the shooty pixel boat casino game. So
I appreciate that consideration.
Yeah.
It would have been fine either way, but I hear where you're coming from, and it's certainly from a place of kindness, and
Yes.
that is not lost on me.
Oh, well, good. I kindness has always been something I've tried to show, especially when I have the opportunity to be destructive. Choosing to be kind whenever possible, I always felt like is a more rewarding choice. But I guess the last question about the podcast necessarily is, I got two really. Do you have any favorite, or maybe not favorite, do you have any moments or highlights or episodes even that stick out to you as something you were proud of, something that was fun, something that was unexpected, anything that sticks out to you?
Honestly, and this is funny because you actually tried to limit this. I mean, not, but just shooting the breeze with you at the beginning.
Oh, okay.
That was by far for me, I think, the most. Sometimes we try a little joke here or there, some hint at sketch comedy, or just shooting the breeze, talking at the beginning, and I never liked how we kind of felt rush to get through to the content or the guest, to get through that. Sort of that's kind of what I like most. I I was disappointed in some ways that we sometimes, and this isn't their fault, but I'd want to get a clan on because of something unique that I thought was about their culture, and then you find out, well, it's not really part of our culture.
It's
It's just
superficial, yeah.
it's something superficial rather than something that has real meaning. And the clans that was rarely the case with were the geographic clans, right? That were centered around a country or a particular language where there was some real coherency. And that was kind of interesting. But the other thing we kind of noticed is that even when you're trying to like find and I mean this in a nice way, is the real weirdos, because they're entertaining. Weirdos means different, right? Not the normal, not the same. But even the ones that I would expect to be the most weird and different and out there, they're all kind of the same, right? The challenges, even when you hear the poach Synpax, it's all they're all fairly similar. And I was a little I'm not disappointed in anybody. I'm just disappointed, that we weren't able to discover some real, I don't know, some real cultural differences between clans. And yeah, I'm not sure I'm answering. I'm not sure I recall your question, but that was one of the things so in not finding that, what I found was unexpectedly the most enjoyable part of the podcast, was just shooting the breeze with you at the beginning and talking about whatever popped into our minds and trying to make little jokes here and there. So that became like, rather than, okay, so tell us about your clan, and
Sure.
So I understand you guys are unique because you got your start from playing Quake together 20 years ago. Okay.
Right. Yeah, it definitely, I think we figured out pretty quickly what sorts of things, what sorts of commonalities were going to come up regardless of who we asked. And that's where I started to sort of go, oh, shit, what do we do about this? Like, there's going to be a lot of folks who, there'll be like a twofold problem. A lot of people will have very similar circumstances or stories, because ultimately a clan is just a game within a game at its core. It's a game that facilitates a higher level of play for another game. And
right.
So a lot of people are going to have similar, and frankly, somewhat superficial answers to the questions. And then I thought, well, are we asking the wrong questions? How do we get somebody to open up a little bit? And I think as time went on, we sort of we learned better as to when to identify little bits of, like, I want to call them like indicators, maybe, of, oh wait, that, go for that, push him on that. Doesn't matter what we wrote down ahead of time. He mentioned that, let's talk about that. Right.
And did you ever see the film it's Unbreakable?
Is that the Bruce Willis one?
Yes.
I did, but I was really drunk.
Well, there's this scene where he kind of realized he has this, among his powers, in addition to being unbreakable, is that he knows that when he touches somebody, he kind of gets a glimpse at their history, including things they're not proud of, they're very maybe ashamed of. So he goes into Grand Central Station during a busy commute time, just sort of puts his arms out a little bit so everybody's just bumping into him, and he keeps getting these flashes of everybody he bumps into. And those are, when we were doing the podcast, that's what I was looking for, is whenever they said something that they didn't really want to talk about, or suggested there was something personal, something they'd rather not got into, or something that was complicated, I knew that's where we wanted to push them. Because that's where you get the nuance. So it's sort of unique, like a conflict over a big fight that broke up over how the treasury was handled or something like that.
Right.
So that was, or, because usually that's where you might find something that would be unique, that would make the podcast kind of interesting, is that, for lack of a better term, drama. Yeah. And just sort of see what you could pull out of them, because otherwise it's, we're all playing the same game, so the nature of a clan can become fairly generic. It's just the human parts, of the game. The closer you get to the human, the further away you get from, the WSD driving a Des Moines around. The more you're going to find something unique and interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in that regard, I feel like there have been one of the most rewarding. With that in mind, one of the most rewarding episodes that I think that we did was actually the CV main roundtable, where we got, after season 9, where carriers in their new iteration were brought into the clan battles and made, they made themselves felt enormously. Suddenly these competitive CV mains were, worth their weight in gold, or oil, I suppose, if you want to call it.
Sure.
Right. And so I thought to myself, I was really glad that you were open to the idea, because I thought, well, I want to hear what these guys have to say. These guys are the most hated people in the game, essentially. These are the best at doing the thing that the most people hate. And the most wonderful part about that was that these guys absolutely leaned into it and were like, yeah, we know that we're hated, and that's fine. In fact, it was, what was it? It was CV NMSL from Rapoi on the Asian server, who we asked them all to sink a ship, which, again, that was just a fun thing that I thought, I thought it was a really lowbrow, simple, entertaining way to make each episode sort of unique, and to sort of get something personal out of a person where they might just normally... They might talk about clan politics, they might talk about clan structure, and then nothing personal comes up until they're like, yes, well, we don't allow shit talking or not safe for work stuff in our clan. And then you're like, so which ship do you want to sink? Oh, the fucking Smolensk! What a piece of garbage! And suddenly the politics drops, and you're just hearing somebody complain like a child. I thought that would be really fun. But these CV mains, and especially CV NMSL, he's the last one, and he goes, I would sink the Hakuryu. And we're going, why? He goes, so that all these people saying that CV mains or CVs are overpowered will have to realize that it's not that CVs are overpowered, it's just that they're bad. And we were just like, I could not have scripted this better. God bless you, sir. And God bless your clan,
Yeah, and that some of these, I mean, again, I suggested this podcast was purely indulgent, but the production... when you're, especially of some of these, I thought it was pretty remarkable that we get folks from multiple servers, multiple cross-server champions, to come and talk about an upcoming clan battle season.
Yeah.
Like the Russian server, the European server, the Asian server, of course, North America. The production of this stuff, I thought was just crazy good, that we were able to pull off and get these voices that folks just had never really heard before. And again, this goes more on the side of things of providing useful public service, right? Something useful to the community. It certainly went pretty far in that direction. No one had ever heard of these guys before. No one had heard their voices. I mean, if you don't play on their server,
right? Certainly on NA, they haven't heard of these
people. Right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and you get somebody who's one of the number one clans from Russia, and they just have a completely different perspective on things. And from EU, and then the clans from Asia. I mean, just radically different, and sort of pulling and getting these people all on at the same time and talking and reacting to each other. It was definitely, I'd say, absolutely interesting, and I mean a real value, I think, to people who are take this game seriously.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there is actual inherent value outside of just implied value there. When you said we're going to get Smile on, I went, who the hell is Smile? You said, oh, it's the champs from the Russian server. And I was like, there's a Russian server? I knew there was EU, and I knew there was... but even at that point, I think I was maybe 4 or 5 episodes in, I really didn't understand that each server was its own isolated... I thought, at that point, if I wanted to, I could literally just switch servers with my account. And I could just play essentially with 200 ms latency, But sure, I'm now playing with the Europeans. I didn't realize that each was its own separate entity with its own specific culture. In fact, I didn't even really get a full grasp until I actually just had General Dort, whom you had put in the file, that we always sort of stored our prospective guests. You had put global rank out with Dort. You'd put that in there months ago, and I went, Who the hell is
That was a
that?
fast. Yeah, that I remember. He ranked out on all the servers and had sort of gave his analysis of the different personalities and cultures on the server and how
Yeah.
distinct they were. I grew up before the age of the internet, and uh, one of the things I did as a child was late at night when you're supposed to be asleep. I had an AM radio, and I would just at night AM signals travel much further than they do during the day.
Really?
And oh yeah, much further. So I would be in South Carolina and I would be tuning my AM station and pick up stations from New York City, from Canada, in all kinds of foreign languages, far, far away, Chicago, etc. And there's sort of just to me lying in bed under the covers, 6, 7, 8 years old, playing with an AM radio, um, pulling in these signals from that it scratched that same itch to get these EU or Russian players on to talk to us, or Asian players. It just had that sort of that from another world coolness to it,
Yeah, so basically, if I can make a metaphor out of that, you were essentially using our podcast like an AM radio, and we were tuning it to try and pick up some signals and some culture and some music from another culture.
Like I said from the beginning, anthropological study.
I actually got I looked into our email, our shared email account for the podcast, and I only do it maybe once every 2 or 3 weeks now, but like I saw it and somebody had emailed us and said, "Hey guys, I love your podcast," which is always great to hear, by the way. Thank you all who do that. He said, "I love the podcast, but I remember hearing something about an anthropological study, and I'm just wondering when you guys are going to do it." I was like, that is fantastic.
That's a delightful comment.
Yeah, like I thought, yeah, that makes sense. There's nothing wrong with the logic of what he just said, and yet it's still so completely wrong. I mean, I suppose I'll have to publish a paper at the end and be like, video game people are addicts, and where the addiction of video games. Before I move off that last topic, I gotta say another of my absolute favorite. There were two favorite moments I had specifically where it was something. Well, I guess one was something you did, and the other was something that a guest did. One was when I realized what exactly the podcast could be in terms of how it actually shaped it, how it would shape a meta narrative that was going on, was when we had the CV Boycott guys on. Because, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, because, I didn't actually know what your thoughts were really until we were on record talking to these guys, and then I hear you basically turn a mirror to them and be like, "What are you doing? Here's what you're doing."
Yeah.
And I was sitting there and my butt was clenched so tight because I was so uncomfortable, and I thought, no, it's true. I was so uncomfortable. I was sitting there, but I was like, he knows what he's doing. Let him do it. If it really gets to the point where it sounds like someone's going to cry or someone's going to get upset, like really upset, then I'll jump in and I will introduce some levity, because I went to school for that. But, I mean, thinking of it afterwards, I sort of went like, wow, you really did point out, guys, if you're trying to do something, if you're going to try and make a change, a big one, you need to know exactly what the hell it is you're doing and what you want.
Yeah, well, that podcast was a little unique because I mentioned to you that the affectation of earnest naivete.
Yes.
It's usually something I kind of carry that to some extent with the podcast. A little bit of smartassery mixed in there, right? But when it came to, sorry,
I'm sorry, I just got some really, really good news. I don't know that I'm allowed to. Say it. I think I just will. Can I tell you?
Did you get community contributor?
I did.
Congratulations. Well earned.
I just got an email saying that I've been accepted. And it is because of this. It's because of this podcast. It's a combination of the podcast and the Twitch channel. Wow. Okay. I'm sorry.
And I want to point something out too, is that I know there are a lot of people that have the community contributor titles. And I could say this because I'm outside of it all now, but I mean, a lot of them don't actually contribute anything community. you do with this podcast. You absolutely are. This is a genuine contribution. We were talking about when we were talking about the podcast. So it was very well deserved. I'm not surprised at all. The only thing I'm surprised at is that it took so long. So,
well, I ended up moving. I had to sort of consolidate things because we had a YouTube channel, I had a Twitch channel, we had the podcast, and so I did end up consolidating some of the stuff to try and make it all work together a little better. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make it all about me there for a second. I want to. Maybe this is a good time to tell you though that I'm really grateful that you were willing to come back and chat with me here. Partly because I missed you, and two, aw, partly because I missed you. I really enjoyed our sometimes 11 p.m., 12 a.m. West Coast time. Just you and I would div up together sometimes in random div channels, and we wouldn't talk about warships really. That was when you and I would actually talk about other things. It reminded me of that when you said that sometimes just shooting the shit at the beginning of a game, at the beginning of a podcast with some of your favorite stuff. But I don't know I know some people know this, but when you asked me to do this with you, I think it was early April of this year, I had been laid off from work because of COVID. So I was sitting at home with nothing to do, trying to be stoic and positive outlook for my lady and for my family and whatnot, and privately trying not to fall apart from existential dread. So when you asked me if I wanted to do this with you, I was thrilled because it was something to sort of apply value and meaning towards outside of just playing a game. And and that the very fact that I started doing that with you, it took me a good 8, 9, 10 episodes before I really understood what we were doing. I'm not going to lie. And understood how to fit myself into that properly. And it has led me to understand a better way of creating goals, applying value to them for yourself, and then also letting other people apply value to your goals so that whatever you come up with is not just something you enjoy, but is something other people can enjoy as well. And a number of really fun things have happened since then, I suppose, since you asked me to start doing this podcast with you, that would not have happened if I hadn't done it with you. And so I contribute you directly. I attribute that to you directly, and I'm very, very grateful to you for that. So thank you for doing that.
Well, you're welcome. And one of the things in terms of just running the client, you've got to be able to do is recognize people who've got abilities and put those things to work. And I knew you had talent for this kind of thing. I recognized that immediately. And I had been kicking the idea around of something like this, but when you came on board to TNG, it was like, okay, this is somebody I could potentially do it with, and your pedigree was perfect for it. You have the probably the best radio voice that I've heard in a while. So it's just, and the right personality. If you were the person I was doing it with, I knew that you could balance things out enough so that I wouldn't have to entirely balance myself. I could balance against you, which would allow me more latitudes in terms of where I could go than if, say, I was doing it by myself. So that was and hopefully this is just the beginning of a very successful and lucrative journey for you. But I will answer. We were talking about the CV boycott was different because I decided not to use the affectation and just let the mask drop. In my day-to-day, that's multiple times a week. I'm in an environment like that, and usually the people I'm up against are pretty well armed themselves. Right.
Yeah.
And I kind of knew that this. I kind of knew I bullied them is what I did. I used my skills in another area against people who had no idea how to handle a potentially hostile environment, and I just clubbed them. But I think by doing what they chose to do, they had to be they had to get that level of scrutiny, right? Because they had started a political movement,
Right.
and that means the gloves come off. And so there's very little gentleness in their own communications on the Discord regarding clans that were participating in it, those
Right.
that weren't, etc. So, but just being able to draw the advocates for that political movement. It was a political movement. This is politics.
Sure. Yeah.
Just drawing that out and coming at them. It was in some ways fun because I've never really gotten to do that on the podcast, nor would it be
Right.
justified or even. I mean, really, what am I going to argue with you about that? That your anime clan isn't faithful to anime or what? Come on. I mean,
Right.
your choice in anime stinks. It's whatever.
Your waifu is trash. Yeah.
Yes, your waifu is trash. But there just really wasn't the opportunity for it. So that one I just decided, all right, game on. And I wouldn't ordinarily leverage that, but this was a case where it was called for. What was your other favorite podcast moment? You said something a guest did.
Yeah. The other moment. Sorry, did you say where you wanted to guess it?
No, you said it was something a guest did.
Yeah, well, it was. I swear to God, it was. Oh, yeah. There were two moments that you did and one that a guest did, and they both actually. The remaining two come from the same episode, which was Sub-Octavian. That was to me a huge high water mark because it was like, oh my God, we got the guy in charge of the development of the studio. Like, for all intents and purposes, it was really astounding to me. So it was partly that he had the audacity to sink the Khabarovsk and just say, that was the high point for me of that segment, like that segment, again, like I said, was always in my mind was always intended as a silly, lowbrow, just fun indulgence where we could stop talking politics or stop talking clan whatevers and just be like, let's talk about the game. What's your favorite ship? It's like, it sort of reminded me of like when you're a kid in school and you pass notes back and forth, whatever, about the stupidest stuff. And he has the audacity to sink the Khabarovsk, and say, I'd just rather start over. It's like, oh my God, it's called the DDR-10 and you did start over. You are a brilliant salesman, sir. From what I had learned, I was like, I know what's going on here. This guy's smart. This guy's clever. And then earlier in that episode, to his face, you literally you referred to the game as Shooty Pixel Boat Casino Game, and my heart grew 3 sizes when you did that.
Well, I think Sub knows what's up.
Yeah,
I mean,
smart guy for.
I think his answer about the Kairos though was honest, but you may have noticed, or maybe not, that we've done this entire episode of the podcast without actually talking about the game itself.
It's true.
And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
To be honest with you.
Yeah. Are you over the game?
I kind of have to be.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. There was something in your voice when you made your decision and you shared it with us that really did tell me. I was like, oh, it doesn't matter if this is, frightening. Like it was sort of frightening for me, not to lie to you, because anytime a sort of, don't take this the wrong way, anytime a sort of father figure or a leadership figure in general departs, it's just a natural process of life where the figurehead, the one shouldering the responsibility and sort of trudging through the darkness and dragging everyone along with them, not to get too dramatic or anything, but when they finally decide to step back and step aside, then it means the responsibility falls on the rest of us to do that ourselves, it's a natural part of life. Everyone has to do it, whether you're male or female. You have to leave the nest and fly on your own at some point. But it was frightening, and it was sudden, and but at the same time, the way you described it, I heard in your voice, I went, this is the absolute right thing for him to do. And I'm not going to try and convince him to stay, because you don't seem to me, nor have you ever seemed to me, as someone who makes decisions lightly. So I knew that it was the right decision for you, and I wasn't going to question it. And I figured I'd give you time. I did ask you. I said, would you be willing to come back and talk to me about, yourself and TNG and Synpax at a later date whenever you're ready? And to your credit, I could hear in your voice, you're like, yeah, I could do that. And I went, okay, got him. Okay, I'll give him some time, but got him.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's this. There's a axis, and on one end of the axis is indulgence, and the other end of the axis is obligation.
yeah.
And this thing was way too far on the indulgence. It was completely on the indulgence side. And to do this as I had decided to play the game was pretty consuming time-wise and intellectually fairly consuming. And it's just the kind of thing that while the community and the friendships are really kind of cool, it doesn't mean for shit.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to break anybody's heart about it, but this is shit. And there are things that really do. And to devote as much to an indulgence, whether it's this or poker or anything else that's, you can make a living doing poker, right? I can make a living doing this, right? But that was never going to be in the cards for me, and nor would I want it, because it's not where my vocation lies. But it was way too over into the indulgence side, and it was just costing opportunities, especially now I did, in some ways it did fulfill some things. I kept certain skills sharp, because what I was doing with the clan isn't wildly different from what I do in real life.
Mm-hmm.
And also I learned some things that I didn't expect to learn.
That was going to be my last question, so go for it.
Well, no, I was going to say that I learned more about Chinese culture through this game and this podcast than I ever could have imagined, than I would have ever been able to learn otherwise. And not just from the people we interviewed from Asian clans, but I had quite a few interactions with some Chinese players through the clan, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so illuminating to me. I've been all over the world. I've been to, I don't know, 31 or 32 countries. And I tend to try, especially when I was single, really try to get to know the culture of the people. And people, it's easy to dismiss, oh, you're just a tourist or whatever, but to really try to get to know the people and their mindset and the way they see things. And, sometimes it's just so starkly unexpected, so starkly different from the way you see the world. And the two times that's really occurred to me was when I was in Palestine, and when I was dealing with these Chinese folks.
That's very
through the
interesting.
Game. And the way they see the world and the way they see themselves and the way they operate, it's completely, and I can't think of a better word, but it is completely foreign. Like, Europe, right? You can culturally similar to the United States. You get some things, right? I've been all over Asia. They are like, I'd say, still very unique, very different ways of certain things, outside of China. Very unique, the mindset, etc., how they operate, how they see things, how they approach problem solving, how they approach difficulties, etc.
Yeah.
But by far the most radically different were definitely was the Palestinians and the Chinese that I came to know through this game. And I would, at least in Discord and in the game, I would try to draw as much of them out of them as possible, with the earnest naivete, just so I could learn, so I could hear them give answers to questions. It was also, apart from that, it was still kind of a way to keep some organizational skills sharp, HR skills sharp, because while I had ordinarily been completely engaged in that type of endeavor in the past, there was sort of a lull for me, I guess you could say, vocation-wise, career-wise, whatever term, where I didn't quite have that. I wouldn't have otherwise been able to keep those skills quite as sharp. So it filled the need that way. But otherwise, it's just completely indulgent. I just sort of thought about all the times I put into it that I could have done something that would have better fulfilled or at all fulfilled obligation. And I think that, and remember we used to talk about postmodernism?
Yes. We had some fun conversations about postmodernism, yeah.
Right, but you kind of always gave me your definition, but I never gave you mine.
Well, by all means.
And I thought that ours were quite different. And I think the postmodernism, what it means, and I know philosophy majors will get their dander up, but what it really, postmodern philosophy really comes down to is that if it feels good, do it. Or if it feels good, it must be right. That's the justification. And that is, I think, on the extreme end of indulgence, and on the other end is obligation to the people, to your forebears, to your children, to your family, to your community, to your religion, to your God, to your country. Pick whichever one you choose to, appeals to you most. And I just think that when you look at the sort of time that gets devoted into warships versus what, something that it more better fulfills obligation, it actually became a very easy call as that became more apparent to me. And and I did still feel some obligation to the clan. I had been wanting to move on for quite a while, but I thought, okay, after clan battle season is over, and I'm pretty confident in the guys, that I could potentially hand it off to, but I really can't. I really can't care.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
No, I do.
I can't care.
I mean, you can't afford to care because
I can't.
It's a sort of there was a guy I used to work with who he was a delightful fella. He's very, very quick-witted, very gregarious, lots of fun, very tall. Big, he had this big, deep, stretchy voice like this, and he was a bartender with me, and he would tell me that I think he was 40 at the time, about a year and a half ago or so. He told me that he actually, in his late 20s, he had a real drug problem where he struggled with drug addiction, and then he ended up having a kid, and he went, "Oh, this is the only thing that matters to me now." The drugs and alcohol that he indulged in, to keep the terminology straight, the drugs and alcohol that he indulged in were just that. They were a selfish indulgence, so that he didn't have to pay attention to something else that mattered, mainly something outside of himself. And when he had his kid, he had this very sweet little boy, and he told me that he basically just said, "Okay, never again." And he's never had a sip of alcohol since then for like 10 years, something like that. Never tried another drug. And he's even really careful about, like, he's so careful about it because he knows what a backslide could mean, so to speak, not to him, but to the people who now rely on him. The bigger picture, so to speak, that I don't even think he takes painkillers, just because he knows he cannot touch it, or the great sacrifice that he made to sort of better himself would be jeopardized, and that would therefore jeopardize the well-being of other people who have now counted on him. And I actually, I thought about that story when you were sort of spelling it out for us, and that's why another reason why I went, yep, don't argue with him, don't fight him, let him go, and just make sure he'll come back and talk to you on the podcast.
Sure, that's I that story rings to some extent. I definitely get it.
Yeah. By the way, I'm not trying to suggest that any sort of hard drug is the same as World of Warships. Not at all. World of Warships is a shooty pixel boat casino game. It's a lot of fun. I still enjoy it. That's why I'm making the podcast still. But I think that, to sort of.
I thought we were going to drive your entire audience to quit the game. That was my goal in coming here.
You're here to drop a nuke. I mean, I think it's really important. I think it's really important that folks who play video games remember that it is an indulgence, and there is a lot of meaning to be found in the social aspect of it, but that everyone should be capable and willing to stop and take a look at how much time they're devoting to an indulgence and make sure that it stays within an area that's not harmful to their lives, because nobody wants a person to overindulge to the point where they have to stop. I don't think game developers want that, because they'd like you to continue playing and continue to pay for the service they provide. And nobody wants to burn out on something, because then they might lose something they enjoy. So,
well, yeah, it's not even it's not just a factor of time, but psychological, personal significance. I guess we're trending towards, but I don't want to come across necessarily as people get turned off by any kind of judgmentalism. But if World of Warships is the center of your universe, maybe reconsider.
Or any game for that matter.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. But you read the way people talk about it on Discord.
Yeah.
And react about it, and it's like, whew.
Well, that was actually something that I, about the boycott as well, and I don't want to rehash that too much, because I feel like this is winding down nicely, and I don't want to jeopardize that. But like, there was something about that where I sort of went, guys, come on, it's a game, relax. Like 1,000 people showed up in a day to to boycott a video game, or to boycott a subsection of a video game, and I sort of went, can we just play? Can we just... I remember video games from when I played GoldenEye 64 at my friend's house, and we would literally tape pieces of cardboard to the TV screen so that the 4 quadrants of the screen were blocked off from each other so nobody could screen watch.
Interesting.
And that was about as real world obsessive as I was going to get with a video game. There's one...
people. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
No. What were you going to say? Because then I'll wrap this up.
I'm saying it goes in the same direction. With all kinds of things that I think it's in our nature to make something very important and focus on it and build ourselves around it.
Yes.
But often we pick things that are not are way too far on the indulgence side and nowhere near the obligation side.
I think that is apt. I would support that statement. Yeah. Well, there's something that I've always wanted to do as we near the end here, and so I'm gonna ask for an indulgence from you for just a moment, and that is that I have always wanted to poach Synpax, and I just now happen to be in the position to poach Synpax. So if I may, for a moment, I happen to be in an XO position in a really cool clan called TNG. And if I may, I would like to pitch to you why you, or anyone else for that matter, because I hear this is a little commercial for a clan, I would like to poach Synpax to Synpax.
All right. Go ahead.
Well,
let's get it over with.
All right. So, one of the reasons why I think, Synpax, that you might consider joining a clan like TNG is because we have a long, long history of steady, committed, and observable growth and skill increase. This is a clan that started several years ago as an offshoot from another clan and has built its way up consistently to a point where it now routinely ranks in high-level Hurricane, along with a small roster of other NA clans. We've had good showings in COTS, and things only will get better from there. We have a great Discord full of a lot of engaging and fun folks, fun and engaging, who like to come in and socialize and have a laugh here and there in divisions and whatnot. And we have a podcast. I don't know if you've heard of it, but a podcast where we explore some of the cultural aspects, more of an anthropological study, really, of this game we call WoWs. And, we've had a little transition in leadership, but I'm confident that as time goes on, we are going to continue to be one of the major competitive clans in this game.
Well, I'm sure that this clan will continue to be successful with you helping as part of leadership and the other great folks who are part of it, but I must politely decline.
I understand. You are off the hook, sir.
Whew. That was a nice pitch. That was a good poach.
Yeah.
I was expecting a little bit more creativity, but I like the straightforward approach.
You know I'm not a creative guy.
Your intros. That was always the great thing about the podcast, was listening to your intros and seeing what you were going to come up with next. It's like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
all right, cool. Or the lead in for Sink a Ship.
Yes,
Those are always pretty good.
Some days, man, I'd wake up hungover, and I'd just be like, I just word vomit something, and then I'd realize later I was like, I literally repeated verbatim the Sink a Ship pitch from 3 episodes ago. It was just.
I don't think anyone pays attention enough to notice.
I hope not. Well, my friend, I don't have anything else warships related to talk about. I think you've answered all the questions. Question asked, question answered, as you like to say. So if there's anything else you'd like to say or to ask, what have you, floor is all yours. Otherwise, I'm good.
Do I not get to plug?
You have a plug?
Yeah.
By all means, if you'd like us to put your Discord server up, I would be happy to.
No. Actually, I hadn't logged into Discord for a month. I popped in, and it's just a stack of messages. But no, I'm actually going to break one of my own rules here.
Okay.
Break one of my old rules. Is that now you have to? I guess I can only do this with your permission, because it is a violation of one of our old rules. But I'm going to go ahead and break it, and then you tell me if it's okay or not. But I know that among your audience, you might have some people who do have a desire to be involved more on the obligation side of that spectrum, but maybe don't know exactly how to do that, because it's, the first rung of the ladder is always the most difficult. And to that end, I would like to invite anyone who has an interest in getting more involved in the world, particularly those of you who have a political viewpoint that might lean a little further to the right, to reach out to me, and I'll find a way to put you to use. The email address I've given out before is fine to email me at. You can also email me at my proper email address, matt@brainerd.com. That's MATT at B as in Bravo, RAY, N as in November, AR, D as in Delta.com. I'm sure Boggzy will link it below. But reach out to me, and I will try to connect you and give you the opportunity to become engaged in a meaningful way.
It is the least I can do. I'll be happy to put those up for you. It's funny, you and I never really talked about politics ever. That was always something that we shied away from. And
I didn't really see any value to it.
Yeah, I mean, for what you and I were attempting to work together towards, that was not the right way to say that. It probably wouldn't have been at all useful. But I mean,
I'll be honest. Oh, so I'm sorry, I'm cutting you off.
No, I was just going to say that, I mean, whether, regardless of anybody's political leanings or affiliation, I 100% supportive of a person's desire to take a more direct engagement in things, in a positive and a constructive way, because I feel like, again, regardless of person's politics, I do feel like the world is getting less considerate, in the sense that people just react now rather than take a real measured and meaningful approach to things, which I would call meaningful engagement, or the opposite of indulgence. I feel like a reactive personality and a reactive behavior is indulgence rather than effort and work. So regardless of your what spectrum you fall under in that regard, I always encourage people to think more carefully and more critically and less reactively.
Sure. And honestly, I've been doing this. I've been working in this field since the mid-90s, and I've always found talking politics to be pretty boring, because especially maybe it's just because of my background. It's, if you do it for a living, you don't want to talk shop all the time, right? But what's much more I think useful is to engaged in terms of organizing or advancing certain political point of view, rather than like talking, because talk is just that, it's talk. But doing something meaningful something concrete, I think is much more enjoyable or much more rewarding. But again, we go back to that old axis of indulgence versus obligation. So it much better satisfies that axis for me. And I think that maybe some in your audience may find it to be the same.
They very well might. The email address he mentioned will be listed in the description below. I can say that Synpax is not as scary as he sounds, so anyone nervous about reaching out to him, don't be. I can say that I can say that it has been a very rewarding experience for me working with him on this podcast, and in any capacity in the game in general. But it's been a rare privilege to do this with him, and I'm proud to be able to continue doing it even if he's stepped away. So
yeah, it's really cool too to see that it's continuing. And drop me a line anytime. I'm sure we'll stay in touch socially, and so far as if you ever find yourself in the DC area or myself in greater Los Angeles.
You got it, man. Well, everybody, I think that's it. This, I think, is the longest podcast we've ever done, and I couldn't think of a better reason to make it so. So thank you all for sticking with us. I really appreciate it. And Synpax, Matt, thank you.
Take it easy, Joey.